Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're putting on our thinking caps, trading in our controllers, and taking a deep dive into Far Cry 5.
It's a good one.
Don't worry, you don't need to be a gamer to appreciate this one. We're going deeper than just headshots and explosions.
Definitely.
We're going to be using the Wikipedia article you provided to really kind of pick apart what makes this game tick, why it's both popular and controversial.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study in game design and storytelling, really. Far Cry 5 takes a sharp turn from previous games in the series, plunging us into the heart of Hope County, Montana. This beautiful setting on the surface, but one grappling with the rise of a rather unsettling group
A little creepy.
called the Project at Eden's Gate.
Okay, so picture this. Rolling hills, blue skies, and a whole lot of folks who seem a little too into their charismatic leader, Joseph Seed. And this isn't just a change of scenery, right? The setting, it's all connected to what makes Far Cry 5 so unique in its approach to gameplay.
Exactly. Unlike earlier Far Cry games with their more linear storylines here, you're thrown into this expansive, open world. Think of it less like following a tour guide and more like being handed a map and told, go explore.
Oh, cool.
You call the shots, which regions to tackle, which missions to prioritize. The story unfolds based on your choices and at your pace.
That sounds exhilarating, but also a little intimidating. What if I get sidetracked chasing butterflies or, accidentally start a bar fight and miss something crucial to the story?
That's the beauty of it.
Hmm.
Ubisoft Montreal, the developers, they anticipated that sense of freedom. They peppered the world with what they call anecdote factories. Imagine them as little story generators, ensuring you have unique, memorable experiences as you explore.
Oh, okay.
So while the main narrative arc is the path you carve, the stories you collect along the way,
Yeah.
those become your version of the game.
So two players could start in the same spot, make different choices, and have totally different experiences.
Exactly.
That's brilliant, but I have to ask, this game stirred up some controversy, didn't it? This whole cult thing, especially set against the backdrop of America.
Yeah.
It feels like a bold, maybe even risky choice.
Absolutely. Far Cry 5 dives headfirst into these murky waters of cultural anxiety and social division. Remember, these came out in 2018, a time of heightened political tension globally.
Right. So naturally, people drew parallels between the game's themes and what was happening in the real world, especially the portrayal of this isolated community arming themselves, preparing for societal collapse. It's hard to ignore that context.
You're right, it sparked a lot of debate. And it's important to note that the developers have said Far Cry 5 wasn't intended as a commentary on any specific political group.
Right.
They were more interested in exploring the concept of extremism itself.
Okay, but it's interesting how a game can become a lightning rod for these conversations about real-world anxieties, whether intentional or not. It makes you think about the power of this medium, right?
Precisely. And that ties into what the developers wanted to achieve, to get players thinking critically about the themes presented. This isn't just about racking up kills or completing missions. It's about understanding the consequences of extreme beliefs when they're taken to their logical and often terrifying conclusions.
Yeah.
And they achieve this in part through the antagonists.
And speaking of antagonists, let's talk about the man himself, the leader of Eden's Gate, Joseph Seed. This isn't your typical one-dimensional bad guy, is he? He feels more nuanced, more unsettling somehow.
He's definitely not twirling his mustache and laughing maniacally.
Yeah.
The Wikipedia article mentions the developers drew inspiration from significant real-world events like the Cold War and the September 11th attacks when crafting his character.
Wow, that adds a whole other layer to it. So they're saying Joseph Seed is a product of those events, a sort of warped reaction to these historical traumas.
It's more about capturing the feeling, the uncertainty and distrust that permeated the aftermath of those events, that creeping sense of us versus them, the fear of societal collapse. Joseph Seed in many ways embodies that fear. He's a symbol of what happens when anxieties are allowed to fester and grow unchecked.
So he's a villain, yes, but one born from a very real, a very human place. Which honestly makes him all the more terrifying. But wait, it gets even more interesting, right? Because he's not the only antagonist you're up against. This whole multiple antagonist thing, tell me more about that.
Right. It's not just Joseph calling the shots.
Yeah.
You've got his siblings, each ruling their own little slice of Hope County with their own twisted methods. So it's not just about taking down one big bad guy. You're facing off against this whole dysfunctional family, each pushing their own brand of extremism.
Okay, so it's like a messed up family business, but with less paperwork and more doomsday prepping?
Pretty much.
Hmm.
You've got Jacob, the militant brother who uses psychological warfare. Then there's John, obsessed with forced baptisms and cleansing sins. And let's not forget Faith, who manipulates people with his drug called Bliss.
Each one a piece of the extremism puzzle. It's like they represent different ways people get drawn into these dangerous ideologies.
Exactly. And this branching structure, it's not just narrative flair, it impacts the actual gameplay. Each region you liberate is tied to one of these antagonists. As you dismantle their operations, the game's music shifts to reflect their personality.
Wait, really? The music changes depending on which sibling you're tackling.
It's subtle,
Yeah.
but incredibly effective. It's this cool way of immersing you deeper into their twisted worldviews. You'll hear country music for John, industrial for Jacob. The soundtrack becomes this eerie echo of their personalities.
No, that's what I call attention to detail. Okay, so we've got this open world, these morally complex antagonists, and a story that unfolds based on your choices. Where does that leave the player at the end of this wild ride?
This is where things get really interesting. The game has multiple endings, but one is considered canon by the developers, and it caused quite a stir online.
Canon, for those of us who might not speak fluent gamer, what does that mean exactly?
Good point. Canon basically means the ending the creators consider the official conclusion to the story. And in Far Cry 5, it's an ending that left some players feeling, well, a bit cheated, to put it lightly.
Ooh, intrigue. Tell me more. Don't worry, I can handle spoilers.
Well, without giving too much away, the Resist ending, as it's called, suggests that maybe all your efforts to fight back against the cult were ultimately futile. The world descends into nuclear war, and you're essentially left at the mercy of Joseph Seed. He believes this apocalypse proves he was right all along.
Wow, talk about a downer. I can see why that ending sparked some heated discussions. It kind of makes all your actions throughout the game feel, well, kind of pointless.
Exactly. It raises all these unsettling questions about free will, predestination, the nature of choice in a world seemingly on the brink of collapse. It's bleak, thought-provoking, and it really stuck with players.
It's like even if you win against the cult, you still lose. That's heavy stuff.
And that's what makes Far Cry 5 and video games in general such a compelling medium for storytelling. It's not just about escapism, it's about confronting these difficult, often uncomfortable questions head on.
And Far Cry 5 definitely doesn't shy away from difficult. But you know what else it doesn't shy away from? Zombies and trips to Mars. Tell me more about these DLC adventures. It's like the game just throws you a curveball after all that serious stuff.
The DLC is where things get really wild. After you've had your fill of Hope County, Far Cry 5 gives you these little side trips into completely different scenarios. You've got Hours of Darkness, which throws you back into the Vietnam War, Lost on Mars. Well, that one speaks for itself.
Fighting aliens on Mars after taking down a doomsday cult talk about range.
Right. And then there's my personal favorite, Dead Living Zombies.
Dead Living Zombies. Okay, first of all, that title alone deserves some kind of award. Second of all, please tell me it involves chainsaws, ridiculous one-liners, and maybe a zombie Elvis impersonator. Don't hold out on me. Is there a zombie Elvis?
You'll have to play to find out. But what's fascinating here is how these DLCs showcase the range of the game's engines and storytelling. You go from this gripping, morally complex story about a cult to battling hordes of the undead in this cheesy, over-the-top B-movie setting.
Yeah, talk about a change of pace.
Right.
From fighting for the fate of humanity to fighting off zombies in a theme park. Sounds like my kind of vacation.
Exactly. But it's more than just a tonal shift. It highlights how adaptable the game's mechanics are. It's like Far Cry 5 is this giant sandbox for experimentation for both the developers and the players.
So they're giving us these tools, these incredible environments and mechanics, and then saying, go wild, create your own fun, whether that's taking down a cult or battling zombies in a funhouse.
Precisely. And that speaks to the enduring appeal of open-world games. They allow us to explore, to experiment, to tell our own stories within these digital landscapes. And Far Cry 5, with its mix of controversial themes, memorable villains, and diverse gameplay, definitely offers a playground you won't soon forget.
I'm ready to book my flight to Hope County Zombies included. This has been quite the deep dive. Insightful, thought-provoking, and honestly, a little bit terrifying. So before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to chew on?
Here's a thought. If games are a reflection of our anxieties, as many argue, what does Far Cry 5's enduring popularity, even 5 years after its release, say about our world today?
Something to ponder, perhaps?
Something to ponder, indeed. Well, that's it for this deep dive. Join us next time when we'll be exploring. Actually, I'm not sure yet, but it'll be fascinating. I can guarantee you that. Until then, happy gaming, happy thinking, and try not to join any cults.